Well, I am so excited to introduce our presenter for today. We are in for a treat. Her name is Dr. Melissa Hoy, PhD. She is a licensed clinical psychologist who has more than 20 years of experience providing neuropsychological assessment and psychotherapy to children and adults. She earned her Master's of Psychology degree from none other than our very own GSEP, and she has a PhD in clinical psychology from the California School of Professional Psychology. And after that, she completed her 2-year postdoc fellowship in neuropsychology at UCLA. As a current faculty member of GSEP's psychology department, she also serves as assistant director of Pepperdine's GSEP online psychology program. When I hear about the courses that she's taught, it makes me want to go back to school. She's taught various courses such as intellectual assessment, advocacy and professional development, clinical practicum, psychopharmacology, and abnormal psychology. Prior to her appointment at Pepperdine, Dr. Hoy worked in a variety of academic, university, and research-based medical centers and community settings. So in addition to her very illustrious academic career, Dr. Hoy has a private practice assessing and treating known or suspected central nervous system disorders, anxiety, and depression. She has also published in the areas of neuropsychology, adoption, and technology as it relates to the field of psychology. Dr. Hoy is active in providing various community outreach opportunities aimed at promoting mental health awareness and support. So as we near Christmas time, you might catch Dr. Hoy enjoying one of her hobbies, which is creating festive succulent centerpieces for the holidays. So without further ado, let me welcome Dr. Melissa Hoy.
Thank you so much, Erica. So maybe on another time we can do some succulents. What I'd like us all to do, whether you're here in front of me or here in front of me in Zoom, just go ahead and settle in, get comfy, get warm. I want us to just take a moment to be mindful about where we're at and why we're here today. I am going to read just a very short saying just to help us kind of get settled in and to help us prepare for today. So if you're not driving, I'd like you to just go ahead and take a moment and just take notice of your breath, right? Just notice if it's quick, if it's slow, if it's deep or shallow. No need to have any judgment about your breath, just to notice it, just to focus on your breath. And we're going to do a couple breaths like that, just noticing what's happening with your body as you're breathing. Now I'd like you to take notice of your toes, just kind of how they're feeling. No need to put words to it, but just notice what your toes, how they're feeling, what they're doing. And then as you're breathing, I want you to kind of travel up your body. So travel up your legs, come towards your knees. You might feel your torso, maybe your belly is coming in and out with your breath. Nice and easy. Come up through your neck. Come up to our face. Keeping our breath going. Just aware. We're not judging. We're not reacting. We're just being present with our moment and our breath. Great. And now I think we're ready to get started a little bit, maybe more relaxed, maybe more in tune. You just took a moment to just kind of check in with yourself. And maybe you noticed that you were cold or warm, depending on where you're sitting out here in this beautiful yard. Maybe you even noticed that there was some tightness, or maybe you didn't notice anything at all. Okay, and that's okay. So I'd like to just go over briefly what we're going to be talking about. And so I can see, I'm just going to move a little bit here. So we're going to be talking about what mindful rest is. And then we're going to be spending a nice little bit of time on mindful rest and what actually happens to our brain with mindful rest, and going over some of the research. And then we're going to talk about how can we practice mindful rest, and particularly how do we do this in our busy schedules? How do we make it tailored for us, and how do we make it useful? And then we might even do a little mindfulness rest together, and then we'll have time for our Q&A. I'll get it. So when we think about mindful rest for today, there's so many different ways to describe it. There's not even one real universal definition. And so we'll talk about that. So as I talk about today, please understand that I'm going to be intertwining mindful rest, meditation, and yoga kind of all together to mean mindful rest. And so I'll be using that interchangeably. And when we think about mindful rest, think about taking that moment to be mindful about what's happening in the present, right? So just sitting with that, understanding, taking that moment to just be kind of grounded and to take note of your senses, of what you're thinking about, how your body feels, and doing it without reacting and doing it without being judgmental. Similar to what we just did with our breathing, when we were aware of our breathing, yet I didn't ask you to change your breathing. If you were breathing quickly, we didn't suggest to change it to go slower, but really just be mindful about what was happening for you. And that's really a big piece about what we're going to be talking about today, with regards to how to practice mindful rest and the great benefits. And mindful rest can be breathing, it can be guided meditation, it can encompass a lot of other practices that really help us to soothe and balance our mind and body. And you'll see today, some of you may have some knowledge. I got a chance to talk with many of you this morning, and so I know many of us come today with knowledge and with experience with mindful rest, but we're definitely going to cover how mindful rest gives us a great sense of well-being and actually happiness. We're going to talk about how even within our relationships can be deepened with mindful rest because there is an increased sense of empathy and compassion. So you can certainly sign me up for that. I think it's wonderful to continue to work on those skills, as well as stress reduction and actually increasing our ability to tolerate stress that comes forward in life, and helping us to actually have brain health and brain strengthening. And we're going to learn some cool things about the brain, as well as other cognitive functioning that's increased with mindful rest, like increased attention and better memory. And there's many other physical health advantages. Okay. So just in brief, some brain changes that does happen with mental rest is there are structural changes that happen with mindful rest. In particular, we see changes in the frontal lobe, in the hippocampus. There's neurochemical changes. We're going to go over those in a moment. Many types of changes within enhancing brain connectivity. So even just how the brain is communicating with itself. So here we have our brain, and the red frontal lobe there. This is really, it's a buzzword when we hear about executive functioning, but the frontal lobe is mostly important in charge of our attention, divided attention, sequencing of information, kind of organizing it, really our decision-making executive up there. And then in the blue, we have the parietal lobe, and this is our primary sensory region in our brain. So it's really taking in information from our senses, making sense of it, and helping us process. The yellow here, the temporal lobe, we really know that to kind of help us with understanding language, learning, and memory. And then the orange or the pink is what it looks here. Our occipital lobe is really our visual processing. And then we have our brain stem in that beautiful electric blue is so important for alertness, arousal, breathing. So we'll be talking about that, and you're going to see a lot of activation in our brainstem. And then our cerebellum here is certainly important with coordination, balance, and posture. And I wanted to just highlight, as we talk about more about the different structural pieces of the brain. And then we can't forget about the limbic system. So the limbic system, actually, these structures are found right underneath our cerebral cortex and above the cerebellum. So it's really kind of in the middle of our brain here. And just a couple features that I wanted to highlight are the cingulate gyrus, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. And these features are very important with regulating emotions and memory, and definitely involved in our body's response to stress. There are many types of mindful rest and certainly many types of different yoga styles. And even within each kind of yoga style, there's subsequent variations of yoga styles. And I certainly want to preface this talk with telling you that I'm not a certified yoga instructor. And I'm really here to talk about the research, to talk about my professional and personal suggestions that I have, and really just to have this as an offering today to talk about these different types of yoga styles. So I chose a couple to just highlight how some of the mindful rest actually stimulates particular parts of the brain. And so I've chosen these 4 to talk about. So please note that these are not the only types and these are not the best types of yoga, but this is what we're going with. So for yin type of yoga, this is a yoga that does a lot of holding styles and breath work, and it's known for stress relaxation. And here we can see the different types of brain regions that are really activated when we're using these types of yoga styles, which I just find fascinating. So if we had fMRIs and we were doing our yoga, our yin yoga, we would see that within the cerebellum, the brainstem, and the amygdala are in particularly impacted during that type of yoga. Here with Iyengar, this has a lot of detailed precision movement. We also see a lot of breath and strength and agility. And here we have the cerebellum again with sequencing and movement. So when we know that that's the types of movements that are created with the cerebellum, we have the occipital lobes that are activated, the brainstem again with that work. So anytime we're really focusing on our breath work and breathing, obviously our brainstem's our best friend there. It's helping us. And then we also see the parietal lobes with the special body alignment and the precision of some of the postures that are associated with this type of yoga. And also our good friend, that frontal lobe, that's helping us with concentration. For the Baptist kind of yoga styles, again, we see a lot of different brain regions that are activated and involved. So with different types of vigorous movements and asanas, we have the cerebellum, occipital lobes, the brainstem again with all that breath work, visual spatial perception with the focusing of the postures, the meditation, the mental focus. That's with this type of yoga. The self-transformation, we have temporal lobes with the flow memory of the movements and being able to kind of move in from one to the other and have that body movement and the body flow. And then the mental focus and meditation again with the frontal lobes. Restorative type of yoga really does work on stillness in the body, relaxation, certainly centering and breath work. And again, we have the calmness and inactivity. That's with the cingulate cortex. We have the brainstem again, which really I think that's been for all of them because we have so much breath work in all these different types of yoga. And the amygdala, which is so important with stress reduction, enhanced mood states. That amygdala is really so important with regards to that fight and flight response. So really being able to trigger that and helping us kind of hone in and certainly helps with the reduction. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the amygdala in a moment. And then again, with the frontal lobes, where it's really calming down our attention and being able to focus and hone in on that relaxation. This slide I really like seeing the visualization of what some of the balance moves look like right next to pictures of our brain where it's showing us what's activated when we're doing these types of balance moves. For me, this helps me have more appreciation for when I'm doing these types of moves, what's really happening in my brain, right? What structural parts of my brain are actually kind of on fire and working for me. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what actually does happen. So, like I said, there's brain structural changes that occur when we're doing this mindful rest. We see thickening in the gray matter. We actually see some thickening in the frontal lobes, and we see thickening in the hippocampus. So primarily within those frontal lobes, that's going to be that executive functioning. The attention is a big part of that we see. And also with the hippocampus, where we're seeing some major changes. Again, that's our learning and memory. Two very important parts of our brain to strengthen. And then the amygdala, interestingly enough, the amygdala actually, we see shrinkage, and that's a good thing. The amygdala is, remember, our, for lack of a better terms, it's like our fight or flight response kind of activator. So if you can think of it as a button, if the button is bigger and it gets pressed, it's going to elevate stress, right? We're going to have an emotional response. So if that amygdala shrinks, if we can shrink it, and we see this, we actually see more stress tolerance, we see less stress, we see more relaxation. So it's a good thing that it's shrinking. And we see that with mindful rest. We actually see the thickening, we see preservation of white matter. And I also said there's some neurochemical changes that occur. There's actually many more than what's up here. This is really a snapshot of what happens with our brain. So with neurochemical changes, we see changes within serotonin, GABA, and also endorphins. And this also helps with overall calmness and elevation of mood. We also see less cortisol being put into the body. And this definitely has to do a lot with the limbic system being triggered here. But certainly cortisol is related to feelings of stress. And we could have a whole lecture on just cortisol, but we know that mindful rest actually helps us to have less cortisol. So that's very important, as well as other types of neurochemical changes. We see changes with growth hormone that's related to preserving youth and helps us with not declining with certain age-related sequelae. And overall, there's enhanced brain connectivity. And one type of brain connectivity that I wanted to talk about is actually the default mode network. So when the default mode network is kind of activated, this is what we sometimes hear of as like the monkey brain. So this is our mind wandering. This is us having self-referential thought, maybe even negative thoughts. It's also where we might have some rumination, kind of getting stuck on a thought, not being able to get out of our mind, or we start to go down that negative tunnel, right? Where we're just kind of stuck on something. Or I know sometimes what can happen for me is maybe I have a thought or something happens, and then, if you start thinking about it, you might also catastrophize about it, or all these other thoughts start to come in here. And now we've just got this unwanted party going on in our head with all this monkey business, right? So the default mode network, we find that with mindful rest, it actually quiets down. So it actually is not working as hard, which is a good thing here, because what we see is we actually start to focus more on what's happening kind of outside of the body too. We're able to better control our thoughts in terms of that negative thoughts, in terms of the self-referential negative thinking. And it helps us with our attention. And this is where it's also helping with that empathy and the compassion, because we're able to kind of slow down or stop or halter that negative reaction that's happening, like with those worries. Big deal for me to have that working correctly for myself. And so what's interesting is that with mindful rest, we actually get better not only of having that not activated as often, and also when it does get activated, we're better at kind of snapping back out of it and coming back into, okay, wait a minute, I need to let that go, or let me be more rational about this. So very helpful. What does all that mean? So we definitely see structural changes. We see different connections being enhanced. What does that mean? Well, some of this is telling us that we have safeguards in our brain. So we're helping ourselves with regards to our brain health. We are strengthening our brain. We actually do have the power to actually change our brain, and with mindful rest, change our brain for the better. Like I said, it promotes cognition. So we have better attention. We're better able to focus. And I think sometimes we talked about enhancements in empathy and compassion. But I also think having better attention also helps us with our friendships because we can focus better. An overall greater sense of well-being, and we definitely see improved scores and certainly more happiness overall, and like I said, enhancements in our relationships, and also each of these things on their own is very powerful, and I think even together this just helps us be a better person. I wanted to take a moment to just highlight some of the research that I reviewed for today. I would say probably in the last 10 years, a lot of research has been out, and one can imagine with regards to what we've all been through, there's been a surge of research with regards to mental rest. And it's interesting that the research is also very varied. So some of the research is talking about, case studies. Some of it is talking about research that's done with maybe like an 8-week mindful-based stress reduction. And universally, what we're seeing, though, is that there are positive effects. There are positive effects with regards to what's happening with the brain and also with overall well-being. And like I said, we are seeing changes in the brain structure. So research is showing that there is less atrophy with individuals who have long-term meditation. So they actually showed that their brains were dramatically and significantly had less brain atrophy as compared to age norms, which that's pretty impressive, as well as the thickening, like I said, within the frontal lobes and also the hippocampus. And again, that shrinkage of the amygdala, pretty powerful. With the default mode network, again, we're seeing that overall, with that being less activated or quieted down. Many studies have shown that to be associated with less stress, with more happiness, and also better attention. There's some studies that have shown with brief mindfulness that individuals have done higher on GRE scores. And overall, the studies have certainly shown an increase in overall well-being, an increase in decreased stress, improvement even after the studies long-term, 6 months, even after a year, where individuals have better ability for stress tolerance. So even if something was to come up, they're dealing with and they're being more effective with things and higher rates of overall well-being. So overall, very favorable research. But I do want to say mindful rest is not just a cure for everything. It certainly can be additive and it certainly can be a great tool. There was some difficulty in kind of comparing apples to apples with the research because, again, there's no one universal definition of mindful rest. Even today, I kind of gave you 3 different things that I'm kind of all combining together and calling mindful rest. And so that's going to be something as we go forward to really be able to operationally define that a little bit better. And then also, just even with regards to the methodology, in many of these studies, I found very few that really tell me exactly what the methods was. What is your mindfulness-based rest that you have here? Is it an hour of yoga? Is it breath work? Is it a combination so that it can be replicated so that we can kind of figure out, okay, what do I need to do so that I can get this brain change, right? So really having a better understanding about what the methodology is so that we can compare apples to apples with the studies. And also, I think it would be very interesting to have more research on what type of meditation skills, what type of mindful rest, or even which type of yoga or yoga poses do I need to do so that we might even have a prescriptive agenda, right? So if I did this for this amount of time, these are the results that I might find. So again, universally with the research, we're seeing overall advantages with regards to overall well-being. That's pretty universal. And most of the studies, they are showing they're being consistent with regards to the changes that actually happen in the brain. However, the methodology and how they got there is varying. So I think how fun it would be to actually have a prescription. Well, if you do this yoga for this amount of time, right? Some studies have found that even within 3 days, they saw on brain imaging changes. Some studies are saying, even 3 minutes a day of yoga or mindful rest, we actually see overall benefits and well-being. So I think that any amount of it that we can do is going to be better than nothing. And I do see it can be dose dependent, where with longer time, for instance, that one study where it showed individuals with even over 20 years of meditation, they had significantly less gray matter atrophy. So it makes sense. The more you practice something, the better you might get at it. And, think about our brain like a muscle. The more we work on this stuff, probably the better we're going to get and the more advantages we're going to have. So it's important to know what those long lasting effects are. And I can only imagine that we're going to have additional research continued. A couple things to think about too are that there are some cautions. And so there are some types of breath work, especially some of the breath work that has more vigorous breathing that is not recommended for individuals maybe that are pregnant, because it can induce labor. And also there are some types of breath work that might even induce certain types of psychological sequelae like mania. So I think even more research into the types of mental rest that are going to be best suited for different individuals, and certain individuals that might have certain types of health issues and any adverse effects too. So those are some of the limitations that are in the research. So you had me at, a younger brain and more relaxation, but how can we get started? So some of us here might already be doing mindful rest. Some of us might be asking ourselves, well, how do I keep up with it? Or how do I strengthen my mindful rest? And how do I keep myself on track? And I know me personally, I find it hard sometimes. And certainly once I get a little bit busier, unfortunately, this is one of the things that kind of just drops off my radar. And I think coming back to it time and time again, okay, how do I reinforce this for myself? And any time when we're starting to start new things or wanting to keep up with things, kind of think about how do we be successful with that? How do we start these habits? How do we keep these habits? How do we check in on ourselves so that we can be mindful about being mindful, right? So we can think about this in a few different ways. So I have reminder, routine, and reward. And thinking about making a commitment to yourself and what works for you. Also knowing that for this mindful rest, this is not a one size fits all, in terms of there's also not a one type of yoga or mindful rest that's going to be better than the others, at least for what we know so far. It's really about finding what works for you, right? Even if you're listening to a meditation, picking the voice that you like, especially if it's on like YouTube, right? Finding a voice that you like, finding the content that's going to speak to you. And actually what might speak to you on Monday may not be what speaks to you on Friday. So having that variation is important. So really finding and finding tune what works for you and what you enjoy is going to be very important. And maybe scheduling it. Scheduling it helps me make sure that it happens. And even setting reminders. So you could set an alarm on your phone. And something that I like to do, and I think is it helps me to be mindful and maybe to be a little bit more successful, is even with that reminder to maybe have a little self-affirmation there, like you can do it, or you always feel better when you're done, or something just a little extra to get you going. You can also visualize yourself doing it. So I might say, oh, I'm too tired, or I have this, but if I visualize myself sitting down, maybe sitting on my yoga mat, I'm probably more apt to do it because my mind is already going there and it's helping me to get there, right? Or even visualizing myself at the end, because I don't know many people who don't feel better after doing some of this, right? So having the buddy system can be helpful. Doing it with friends, having them even help you be accountable can be helpful. And planning. So figuring out what you want to do. And that kind of also goes back to scheduling. So if we know what we want to do and we kind of plan it out, we can also be more successful, and we can ask ourselves, what's going to make this easier for me? Am I a morning person? Am I a night person? Are there certain days where this is going to work and certain days it's not going to work? So really setting yourself up for success, right? And also being flexible with that, and knowing that there might be days when you had all intentions of doing something, you had it planned, you had your alarm go off, you were set up for it, and something else got in the way. Well, that's going to happen because that's life, right? And allowing ourselves to be flexible, and maybe keeping things really simple too. That can be helpful, and having things set up, right? Making it flow. Again, thinking about how can I help myself be successful with this, and changing it up from time to time. So kind of checking in with yourself and changing it could also help to kind of keep it fresh and to keep you interested in doing it. I also like to track my progress so that I can see the effects of what's happened. So whether it's being able to do a certain pose or even being consistent with doing it X amount of days, tracking progress can also be really helpful to with our self check-ins, and also with any type of personal rewards we want to give ourselves, whether it's a pat on the back or a gold star. I know on my agenda, I'm old school. I still have a paper agenda as well as, on my phone and on my computer. But on my agenda, when I actually write when I work out, and then or my yoga, and I circle it, or I give myself a star. And then I can also go back, and it helps me be able to track what I did. And if there's certain, let's say that there's a certain meditation or something I've done also, I'll write it down so I can remember which ones I like, because honestly, sometimes I'm so quick on my time that I'll just scroll down and choose anything. And sometimes I don't remember which ones I liked. And so, important to do that. And know the benefits of what we're doing. We can go back and look at those slides. I know which parts of my brain are being activated when I'm doing my posture, right? When I'm doing my balancing moves. I know that I am working on that amygdala that I want to shrink, right? When I'm doing all of these different meditations and my breath work. And I know that the research tells me, right, that not only am I strengthening my brain, but my overall well-being is being improved. And I see that because I'm taking note, I'm tracking my progress, I'm checking in with myself to see how I'm doing, right? And I'm visualizing what my goals are. Another thing I really like about mindful rest is, again, it's not a once, it works for all of us. It works for any body. And I like that part. It works for any body, and it works for my body, whether my body wants to be cooperative or not that day, because everything can be, it can be changed to fit my needs and what my body is able to do. There's accommodations. And for instance, with yoga, you can skip certain moves, or you can do a longer move if you need to and not move on to some other things. So, I mean, I really appreciate that. And it helps me to not also focus on judging myself while I'm doing it, because I'm trying to be mindful, and that's not part of being mindful. So that's part of how I personalize it for myself as well. This slide I like. It's mindful rest at your pace and service. We really don't have a lot of excuses to not do some type of mindful rest. It's pretty much at our fingertips, and it can be free. We can do it anywhere, anytime. And again, anybody can do this. We can do it with people, without people. We can be led. So you'll see here, just obviously it's on YouTube. There's lots of apps. There's the Calm app. There's books, there's podcasts, there's live classes. We even have classes here at Pepperdine that are live and also that are recorded that we have access to for some mindful rest. There's retreats. There's trainings that you can go to any time of the day that works for us. We could do this. And here are a couple of my favorites. just in case they might work for you. And again, what I might like might not be what's your cup of tea, and that's okay. And I do think what's most important is that you find things that you do like. There are some voices that I just absolutely really enjoy, let's say for breath work or yoga even, or certainly for meditation or certain music. And then there's others that I'm just quickly, not using. And it might be your favorite, and that's okay. So again, finding things that you're going to like is also going to help you be successful because you're going to do it. And that's what's important, right? Whether it's a 3-minute, and there are 1-minute yogas, there are 3-minute yogas. There is even airport yoga, and I've done it standing up with my luggage right here. I was doing a 30-day challenge, and I was not going to let traveling get in my way, right? So we can all do 1 minute. And sometimes that's what we need to keep with it, to have that consistency for us to kind of get it under our belt, right? To work on those habits. And so sometimes that 1-minute yoga is what we need. And you can even do it in bed. So I like yoga with Adrienne. I don't know if anyone here's, I see some, yeah. So what I like for her is, first of all, she's really easygoing, and she also has her dog Benji with her, and it's just very relatable. And she just has on her channel a plethora of options. There's AM yogas, stretches, there's evening, there's challenges, and I love the neck and shoulders one. And I think this is like 11 minutes. And especially with all the work at our desks, if we're doing that or reading on the computer, this is a great one for me. Also, you'll be giving all these slides, there's hyperlinks, so it'll take you right to them. And also, I got introduced to yoga with Cassandra. She's different than Adrienne, and I like her too. She's a lot of fun. She has a great 10-minute AM yoga stretch. She also has challenges. She has like a 7-day challenge and a 30-day challenge. And that might be an interesting way to get you started too, or even just to kind of reinvent or get you settled back into things, is some of the challenges. And many of her challenges are also, in her yoga, ends with a 5-minute meditation, like an affirmation meditation, which can be really nice. I recently found this 6-minute mindfulness meditation with yoga in Melbourne, which I think we might be looking at in a moment. And then also there's a quick 5-minute grounding that I really like. So these are just a couple things that I like. And again, it's an offering to you. You may love it, you may not. Something for you to try. I'd like to I know we're going to have questions and answers in a couple minutes, but I would like to know what obstacles might be in your way to kind of getting started or to stay with your mindful rest, right? Is it too busy? Anybody have any suggestions of what kind of, as they're sitting here, they might be thinking, yeah, that sounds all great, but this isn't going to work for me?
Are able to correlate or beginning to correlate, different postures or practices with actual brain function. And I used to take yoga years ago. It doesn't fit into my lifestyle right now. It's not something I want to do, but it made me think of things that I do that aren't research, maybe aren't covered by research, but work for me, like a long walk at night when it's peaceful, listening to certain podcasts, gardening, or a long drive, like a certain type of drive, and I think a lot of people have those things, but I guess those aren't, it's sort of a question. Those are hard to research. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about people sort of tuning into what gives them joy or what they feel is mindful rest, even if it doesn't fall within, say, what's being studied right now or yoga.
Right. Good question. And I did actually look at one article that kind of teased out more mindful-based stress reduction, and also what you're talking about with regards to just relaxation, things that people do that might be a long walk. And they didn't see significant brain changes. However, they did see a correlation, a similarity between the both with regards to overall wellness and well-being. And then Of overall ratings of well-being, there was not a significant structural changes, but that was one article too. But I do think you're onto something, and some of what you're talking about actually is definitely going to be mindfulness too, right? There is mindfulness that we can do when we're taking a walk. So I mean, the big piece of that is really focusing on the present, right? And kind of quieting those thoughts and the judgmentalness and really being kind of grounded with that moment. And I would imagine that we're going to be seeing more research too until different types of mindfulness that's maybe not what we're talking about, to the specific point, like a yoga class, like some of the more mindfulness meditation. Sure. Bottom line is, if that's working for you, right, keep doing it. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, I have a few clients. I'm also in this wellness space that you're in. And a lot of the feedback that I get is that they're busy moms and they don't feel as though it's not that they don't feel as though they deserve it, but they put themselves last.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about their family. So if you could speak to that, I think it would be really helpful to a lot of people in the audience.
Absolutely. And I think I can probably fit right in that category. I'll tell you that for myself, what helped me is really to kind of term it more as my physical therapy. So, and also putting it in my calendar as that's how, kind of just taking that little switch in that terminology and reframing it helped me to really see the significance and the importance of that. So that helped. And then I didn't feel so guilty taking that time. And I think also what can be helpful is focusing on what can I do with my time? And not everybody has that same amount of time and those opportunities. And so knowing that even if maybe I can find an extra 5 minutes, maybe I get up 5 minutes earlier before the kids are up, or maybe while they're doing this, maybe it gives me an opportunity to do a 15-minute yoga or something like that. But really, really seeing the benefits and the value of taking that time for yourselves, which I think we all know, but sometimes we don't do that for ourselves. Some things can be done depending on how old the children are, or even your family, can be done together as a group. So that could be an option too, to do things together. Again, you can do it on the TV. You can practice other ways. So even in the community, there's opportunities. So that might be a helpful suggestions as well. And then to just keep trying. And also as our children and as our families change, our opportunities might change too. And so to kind of, again, be flexible with that. Yes.
So I am retired, so I have no excuse. I have no children or grandchildren around. So what I'm trying to do is just do breathing in bed, in the morning, before I get up, and before I go to sleep. And it's just doing the breathing to get that mindful rest. But I want to ask you, how do you know when you're being a recovering type A, person, how do you know when you're at your optimal level? Because in my case, this is very pragmatic, practical. During COVID, I would play bridge 2, 4, 6 hours a day. So my cortisol levels were up. I was in fight mode all the time because I'm competing. And so is that unhealthy? But it was my high, my adrenaline, my cortisol levels were high, and I love it. And I still love to be in that mode where I'm competing. But when is it unhealthy? And, I sleep 7 hours straight, so that isn't the problem, but it's, let's say, between those fight tournaments, or, when you have to clean your house, or you have to get your adrenaline up to accomplish household tasks. So do you have is this a normal thing where you look at our brain, our brains, or do we know? I know when I'm overloaded because my thyroid levels go low. So, but anyway, this is fascinating because I'm thinking just in terms of my practical, pragmatic life. But there is no excuse for me not to take 5 minutes. but the balance is really key. And I think for a lot of women who are busy, and even if you're a mom or whatever, you
Mhm.
fill up your day with things you love to do. So how do you find that balance?
Right. Well, I think the wisdom in what you said was that finding what works for you and what that balance is for you. There, these things you enjoy, so that's going to be important. And if you notice that you're not enjoying it or you're feeling too overwhelmed and you're noticing that, and know what those red flags are of when things are off balance or off kilter for you, and then maybe dial back. But I think it's important. Well, let me speak to all of us in saying also that we do understand that there's overall improved well-being, right? We're able to be less reactive when we have, again, our brain is kind of quieted down in those areas, and be better attentive. So that could also be some buy-in of why us busy, especially us busy mothers and just busy sisters and friends, to take this time, because not only are we going to benefit from it, but actually, our family is and our friends are, and we also might be able to be excellent role models with regards to mindful rest. And so with that, do we have time to do our practice? I would love to take an opportunity to actually practice with all of you. And I do want to note, I don't know, hopefully if anyone's driving, I would recommend not to do this and maybe wait till you get the email and play it then. And also just want everyone to kind of remember that with mindful rest, it's not that our thoughts are stopped. So if you go through this and you're listening and then your mind wanders off to what you're going to do tomorrow or what you have to do in an hour, that's normal. That's okay. Try to focus back in on what you're hearing. Be mindful about your breath. And what I'm hoping is that we enjoy this together. So we're going to go ahead and start this.
Thank you for joining me for today's practice. Let's take a comfortable seat, perhaps with a cushion or block to elevate your hips. Allow yourself these first few moments to settle in, making any necessary adjustments. Once you're ready, gently close down your eyes. Start to notice your breathing, gently deepening and slowing down your breath. Take a deep inhale through the nose and out through your mouth. Once more, just like that. Deep inhale through the nose and out through your mouth. Allow your face to soften, releasing the jaw, the shoulders, and allow the crown of the head to lift up towards the sky as you ground down through your seat. Sensing the length along the entire spinal column. Begin to notice the breathing coming in and out of the nose. Perhaps sensing the coolness of the breath as you inhale and the slight warmth of the breath as you exhale. Allow the breath to be as it needs to be. Some breaths might be long, some might be short. One breath gently cascading into the next. Imagine your mind to be as spacious as a vast, open, clear sky. And any thoughts, sensations, or feelings that arise are like clouds that simply pass through. Observe and recognize them, but no need to engage or respond. Creating the space for whatever needs to be present to be here. Notice the space that you've created and continue to lightly follow your breathing. Place your left hand over the center of your chest and then your right hand on top of the left. You may feel the grounding sensation of the hands on your chest and allow the breath to softly deepen into that space. With each exhale, softening and letting go. Three more breaths, just like that. Inhaling into your hands. And as you exhale, letting go. Allow your hands to release down by your side onto your thighs. And when you're ready, gently blink open the eyes.
Again, it's all about the voice, so you have to find one that you like. I'm glad to hear that some of you also like that. And not only did she have a beautiful voice, how she led us, I liked. And so again, paying attention to what speaks to you is important, right? I also liked the music and then the waves, hearing the water crashing. And then also, if you don't want to close your eyes, it's a beautiful scenery. So kind of checks all the boxes there. How are you feeling? Did you notice? Do you feel any different? Do you feel a little more calm? Well, I hope that you enjoyed it and want to encourage you. So now you actually all can check your box off for mindful rest for today. Not only did we have our quick little check-in the beginning of our breathing, but we just did a great mindful rest together as a group. And again, you can do that with people. You can actually send this to your friends and family and do it on Zoom together. You can do it by yourself. You can do it with your family, maybe even with your kids. So I wanted to open up for some questions and answers. I know we have encouraged those that are on Zoom also. Hopefully I have the answers, and if I don't, I will find them.
You've read any facts about, while you're asleep, you're still sort of listening to what's happening with that sort of meditation.
I haven't looked into research on that. That's very interesting. I do know obviously that there's different brain waves and we have different, sleep cycles. And so I do know that meditation can help us get into, and quickly get into the different, we're actually changing our brain waves to get in, into the sleep cycles. And so it could be that when we're just in that really light sleep or that transition from being awake into sleep, that we are still processing what we're hearing, but I can't really speak more to it than that. I also wanted to add that I don't know if you or other people that have younger children know about the Go Noodle app. So for that one, some of the schools we've been using some of the functions on there for PE, but on the Go Noodle app, they have a section that's under the flow section, and all of them, they have 3 to 5 minute meditations. And some of them are also these great guided visualizations and guided imagery. They're definitely geared for kids, but I've used them with adults because it's so easy to just watch, and it's 3 to 5 minutes. And that's also one that we can do with our kids. I'm so glad to hear that that's been working for her.
Hi, I know that there wasn't in your research, there's not a consensus on the operational definition of mindfulness or
Mhm.
mindful rest. But one of the things that I think is interesting is that rest does not necessarily mean that you're still,
Right.
right? So I don't know if you can speak to that in any way, like how activity, because again, yoga, Pilates, I'm a certified Pilates instructor and a physical therapist. And so movement, I know, can absolutely change the brain. But can you do you have any thoughts about a operational definition that you would be able to offer us today on mindful rest?
Right, on mindful rest. So when I think about mindful rest, kind of going back to how I had referenced it in the beginning, would really be with regards to being focused and attending to the present moment, right? And being aware of just kind of what's happening, mind and body, taking it in and not reacting or being judgmental. And I think maybe that's where we're getting that rest, because there's not a reactivity to it or a judgment to what we're doing, but really, and also, even though we know with mindful rest, our brain is being active, right? It's activating, it's actually changing. And many things, we're also seeing that with that activation, what's happening in our brain, it's also helping us, in a sense, be more attuned to what's happening. And so perhaps I think that's where we're getting that rest.
Will you share the math analogy that we had talked about in the kitchen about, if you need to get better at math?
Oh, yes.
I think that is helpful.
Sure. So we were talking earlier, and I was explaining that, if we're struggling in math, right? Let's say, or if our children are struggling in math, or if we are, then we want to practice math facts, right? So we figure out where we're struggling at and what needs to be worked on. And so we do that. And let's say that if my addition, if I need to work on addition, I would work on it, adding, and I would practice that. And I would hope and expect that with time and with practice, I'm going to get better at those math skills. And so with mindful rest, we can think about it the same way. If we're going to be working on either breath work or yoga or other mindful rest activities, with time, we're going to expect that we're going to get better at that. When we know that happening in our brain, right? When we know that there's certain parts of our brain and chemical changes that are occurring, with time, we can figure that that's going to get better, which is really why we're seeing some of that thickening in the frontal lobes, and when we're seeing those actual structures to be reduced. It's with that time and with that practice that we're actually seeing those changes. So one can just kind of assume that with that practice of mindful rest, we're also going to get better with that and continue to reap the benefits, not only in that moment. Like, I felt a lot better after that 5-minute meditation. And if even just after that one moment, right, after that one practice, I'm feeling better. But with continued use, we're also going to see, continued and longer term benefits.
Do you think that prayer would also be something that could be meditative and
Absolutely.
okay.
I do think that prayer can be meditative, and
So it would have the same benefits as well.
So I don't have research to back that up, but I personally think so. I personally experienced that. And that would be a great study.
Well, thank you. Would you please join me once again for Dr. Hoy for sharing your knowledge and the research that you've done to prepare for us today, that it wasn't just something that you already had in your pocket, that you really took time to care for us. So we appreciate you. Thank you. Well, with that, this is the conclusion of lifelong learning for 2022. Wish you and your family all the best as we depart for the holidays. We are going to take a break and we will meet you in the new year. You'll get emails from us when we will gather again. So thank you to those that have joined us on Zoom, and we'll see you in the new year. Thank you so much.